Welcome to the Explainer. Every modern democracy out there faces this incredibly delicate balancing act, right? It's the classic tug of war between what a country owes its citizens and what those citizens actually owe their country in return. Today, we're diving straight into this by looking through a very specific lens. Part 4A of the Indian Constitution. We're going to break down India's fundamental duties and see exactly how a democracy structures the moral and civic obligations of its people. Let's get into it.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll cover the birth of fundamental duties. Second, the 11 civic obligations. Third, the purpose of duties. And finally, how these rules act as reflections of Indian culture.
Okay, part 1, the birth of fundamental duties. Before we even look at the specific rules, we really have to ask a foundational question. What exactly does a nation formally ask of its people, and how do those requests actually become official? Our source for today gives us a really grounded look at Article 51A. The author defines these fundamental duties crystal clear. They are moral and civic obligations for all citizens. So we're not talking about mere suggestions here. This is a literal constitutional code of conduct. But, constitutional law is a living, breathing thing. It adapts. These duties weren't actually in the original Constitution at all. They were added way back in 1976 by the 42nd Amendment Act. And this was based entirely on the recommendations of the Swaran Singh Committee. Fast forward a couple of decades to 1998, and the Justice Verma Committee was put together specifically to figure out how to generate better public awareness around these duties. And the evolution didn't stop there. In 2002, the 86th Amendment made another really crucial addition. So, the magic number here is 11. The Swaran Singh Committee initially brought 10 fundamental duties into Article 51A back in '76. But thanks to that 2002 addition, the number grew. Today, there are exactly 11 fundamental civic and moral obligations officially asked of the Indian citizen. Moving right along to Part 2, the 11 civic obligations. To make all 11 of these digestible, our source notes actually group them by theme. First up, we've got the national and political duties. Now, this isn't just about saluting a flag. We're talking about the fundamental survival of the state. Citizens are legally obligated to respect the Constitution, the national flag, and the anthem. They have to cherish the noble ideals that inspired the national struggle for freedom in the first place. And crucially, they're asked to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. That even means stepping up to defend the country and render national service when called upon. Basically, these are the absolute bedrock of a unified nation. Then, moving from the state itself down to the societal fabric, we have social and cultural duties. This is really about how we treat each other every single day. The Constitution mandates promoting common brotherhood across all diversities, and it explicitly demands renouncing any derogatory practices against women. It's a clear call to value and preserve India's incredibly rich composite culture. And on a purely practical level, it means safeguarding public property and strictly abandoning violence. It's all about actively maintaining a harmonious, functional society. Now, this third group is just fascinating because it shifts our focus outward to the physical world, but also inward to the human mind. Outwardly, there's a strict mandate to protect and improve the natural environment, meaning forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife. But inwardly, this is wild. Citizens are actually obligated to develop a scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. It is incredibly unique for a constitution to actively mandate the cultivation of a scientific mind. And finally, it asks everyone to strive for excellence so that the collective nation is constantly rising to higher levels of endeavor. And of course, we absolutely cannot forget that all-important final addition, the 11th duty, technically listed as Article 51AK. Like we mentioned in the timeline earlier, this was bolted on in 2002 via the 86th Amendment. It plainly states that a parent or guardian must provide opportunities for education to their child or ward between the ages of 6 and 14. The nation basically recognized that empowering the next generation through education isn't just a good idea, it's a fundamental civic obligation. Which brings us to Part 3, the purpose of duties. So why go through the trouble of amending the Constitution to explicitly list all of these out? What function do they actually serve in the grand machinery of governance? Well, our source notes point to a really core democratic challenge, reconciling the claims and rights of the individual citizen with the responsibilities they owe to civil society. In a democracy, we are very quick to claim our rights, but no democratic system can ever succeed if its citizens aren't willing to be active participants. Giving your best to the country means actively balancing what you demand with what you provide.
And that leads to a really powerful statement derived straight from our source text. Awareness of duties is as important as awareness of rights. The author emphasizes that to hit this critical balance between the individual and society, it's absolutely essential to orient the citizen to actually be aware of their responsibilities. Democracy is, at its core, a two-way street, and the Constitution demands that we recognize our side of the bargain.
But hey, these aren't just empty philosophical words. If we look at the usefulness section of our source notes, we see that some of the duties enshrined in Article 51A have actually been incorporated into separate, fully enforceable laws. They form this guiding philosophy that literally shapes actual binding legislation, all to ensure we get that active participation from the public. All right, our final section, Part 4, Reflections of Indian Culture. We've talked a lot about the law, the amendments, and the civic obligations themselves, but where did the spirit of these 11 duties actually come from? Well, the 1998 Justice Verma Committee concluded that these fundamental duties aren't some foreign concepts or burdensome rules just forced upon the public. Not at all. They are reflections of the values inherent in Indian culture and traditions. They reflect the traditional Indian way of life. The Constitution was really simply putting onto paper the moral and social compass that was already deeply embedded in the culture's history. I want to end today's explainer by leaving you with a totally fascinating thought experiment pulled verbatim from our source document. The author poses this idea. If every citizen performs his or her duties, then most of the loopholes of the present-day citizen society would be contained, if not completely eradicated. Just think about that for a second. Is the ultimate solution to society's most complex problems really just the widespread, genuine fulfillment of our basic civic obligations? It's an incredibly powerful idea to ponder. Thanks so much for joining us for today's explainer, and we'll catch you in the next one.